Hello and welcome.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Inside the Message.
We are back.
This is Brother T. I'm Rev René. We're so very grateful that you are joining us for this episode, for this conversation. Thanks for being here.
Right. This is our Christmas party, right?
Not yet.
Oh.
No, next week will be, because next week it'll be the Wednesday before Christmas.
Yeah, hard to imagine. But this is Inside the Message, and you had a great message on Sunday. Loved it. I thought it all just came together, and I especially loved it because I was there when we got married, and we got to
You were.
We got to share a few scenes from our, some pictures from our wedding, and just kind of share the story. So it was a lot of fun for both of us.
Yeah, I think we were both really. It was a heartfelt message and production, and I just want to acknowledge you because Tony took the different pictures from our different devices and kind of pieced it together to tell the story that I was telling, and I think that it's your best work, and I want to say thank you for doing that.
Absolutely, it was great, and life is a beach.
Life is a beach, no doubt about it. And you can hear that any way that you wish to hear that. And that's the beauty of our teaching, isn't it?
It is. We give everything all the meaning that it has.
Exactly. Yeah. And one of my favorite aspects of it also was that 2 years later, what a nice way to recognize not only our marriage, but the experience of our honeymoon. It seemed that 2 years ago when we came back, we just hit the ground running, and we really didn't share a lot of that experience with folks. We were kind of new to a community. We were new in the Nashville area. And so for me, after 2 years to kind of go back to that journal and then see the thread of the story that I shared, and it really was just this little wisp of a thread that that was evident throughout my journal, but it was just this little piece, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is an example of rising in consciousness. Yeah, and great. Shifting.
Yeah.
So
I just want to ask you some questions and maybe just kind of unpack it a little bit.
Okay.
Right. So I know we've been talking about the levels of consciousness. So what level of consciousness were you feeling like you were trying to reach to and explaining for us in that talk?
Yeah. So that's a really good question, because I was doing two things. I was giving the overview again and giving the demonstration of the overview with a real life story. And, but then my focus returned to the level 2 consciousness. So the week before you had talked about level 1, which we call the victim level consciousness. And then in that level of consciousness, we believe life is happening to us and that we've got everything backwards and upside down. We think that effect is cause, and we tend to blame and judge the world for the experience that we're having. And the beginning of shifting that is as we rise to level 2 consciousness. And so my focus returned to the level 2 to give a little bit of emphasis there. And that's where we begin to take responsibility for our thoughts, responsibility for our experience, responsibility for our life. We begin to release blame. And so I shared a lesson from A Course in Miracles. It was the lesson that I am only affected by my own thoughts. And that was in an effort to, in addition to the story, to illustrate that as I indeed shift my thinking, I shift my experience and how I see, just like, depending on where you're at and how you're perceiving things in this moment, how you hear life as a beach. It's you're the one who, as Brother T said earlier, giving everything in life the meaning that it has. So that would be the level 2 consciousness.
Okay. So some of the attributes that of that level, can you just kind of, what's the benefit of being at that consciousness level versus the first level we talked about was victim consciousness. So what would we call this? I know you talked about it in in a couple of ways.
Right. So we have traditionally called it the manifester level of consciousness. And what it is that our thoughts are things, and that we can choose our thoughts and thinking to shift our experience of life and how we perceive life. And so it can be called the manifester level of consciousness, that thoughts are things, that what you decree is, and it is the level of consciousness where individuals come into New Thought teaching, and, it can be popularly called the law of attraction. Many people are familiar. What you focus on increases. So your attention and your intention, and you have control of that. You choose that. We are choosing beings. And so this level of consciousness, I also called it the victor level of consciousness, that we become victorious, or we begin to realize that we do have some level of authority in our experience of life and over our thoughts. We have dominion over our thoughts, so we become victorious over ego level thinking. And then finally, a final way that we can call it or describe it is manifester. It can also be called manipulator, so where we can sometimes become so focused on an outcome that we start to control and be controlling, rather than opening up to, a higher consciousness. So this is an in-between stage where we begin to take back control, if you will, of our thoughts and our thinking, only to prepare for the next level, which is to actually, to some degree, create more spaciousness and to let go. So we become directive with our thoughts. This is where we do, our affirmations, where we affirm that which we desire in our life, or the qualities. And it's also where we do our denials, where we say, get thee behind me, negative thought. Finally, at this level of consciousness, we perceive that life is happening by us. Does that give a good? It
does. I think, and we've had conversations between ourselves. One of the things that occurs to me is that some of the I just want to refer back to what we're teaching here in True Thought. It kind of starts hemming you in, and it is the law. We could say the law of what works, or we could say that it's about consciousness, and we traverse these levels of consciousness. But when we look at it, if we dive in too deep too quickly, I believe that it kind of is intimidating. In other words, it doesn't sound like our experience. And so I believe that other pathways have appealed to people by really kind of catering to the ego thought system. And we've talked about it to some degree, but there's basically two thought systems. So we have the thought system of the ego, which is a complete thought system in and of itself. And it's hard to refute it because it is a complete thought system in and of itself. And then there's the thought system of love, or the thought system of God, or the way things work, if you will, in what we call true thought. So true thought kind of flies in the face of the ego construct, and its way of thinking. So how can we? I know, like you mentioned, the law of attraction. So the law of attraction really kind of appeals. I believe it appeals to the ego, right? Because the ego wants to, it believes that this would be great if I could figure out how to attract what I want in my life. Then I can have what I want, right? That's really, I think, the attraction for the secret. But I felt like and I think you've spoke about this before too in some places, that the ego thought system around the concept of the law of attraction can be kind of a trap, because people think, I could just sit on my couch and I can think of $1 million and I'm going to manifest $1 million. Kind of help us see what is the difference between the thought system that really does work, and this thought system of the ego mind, and how can we bridge that gap? I don't know if I'm asking the question.
Yeah, no, I get the question. I get it. I believe. And so how I would, even as you're talking, And we've been kind of talking about these levels of consciousness. It's really a system that works together, and it shows it's meant to be a tool. And sometimes when you have a mechanism, you've been a mechanic, you understand how things work mechanically. We're taking one aspect and we're kind of myopically looking at, that one piece when really it works in a larger system. And so I do believe that this level of consciousness and concepts of the law of attraction and the manifestor consciousness can be appealing to the ego, looked at in and of itself. But as I was trying to explain in my talk, is like I could take my best thoughts, and there is value in disciplining our mind. I believe that we as humans have to arrive at a place where we begin, because we've had it backwards for so long, that we have to begin to discipline our minds and use a mind retraining program, if you will, to help us shift. And I liken it to, I realize that I'm in pain, I'm suffering. I must be in a victim level consciousness. So where am I blaming, and where can I take responsibility, and where can I begin to take better thoughts? And so I take better thoughts only to surrender my thoughts and my thinking, and even what I think I desire, even what I think I want to manifest. I begin to cultivate a relationship with my higher self, my higher power, with God, with spirit. And I begin to offer kind of the idea of this. Here's what I think I want, this or something more or something better. Here, take my best thought and transform it into the highest thought that I may not be able to see, because you know what? My mind is so conditioned right now by a completely different way of thinking that, and thinking in general, that I discipline it to a certain level. And then at the same time, I begin to offer my thoughts. And then that prepares us for the next level of consciousness.
So a lot of the, my own conditioning was more in traditional theology, Christian theology, if you will, and the cornerstone of that teaching was guilt. How can we avoid? Because I can see if you're saying I'm just going to think my best thoughts, then that looks like it's my responsibility to think, and I've got to discipline myself to have better thoughts. How can I avoid falling back into the trap? I mean, what's the difference between this thought system and the thought system that says, if you don't think your best thoughts, then you're guilty? And then I start recriminating myself because I'm judging myself for not thinking best thoughts. How can I bridge this? Because that seems to be a little bit of a hurdle because of my conditioning. I'm going to very easily fall back into blaming and judging myself for my thoughts.
Yeah. So it's a really great question. And what happens to the guilty? The guilty are punished. The guilty, are somehow punished in some way. And so we live actually in a benevolent universe. And the law, if we're going to talk about this law, is that, you give what you give, you receive. And so if we experience something, I took my best thought, right? And I have an experience where it didn't quite fit the bill. It's really only this opportunity to go deeper. It's really ever only this opportunity that, there's more depth to this process than what I'm trying to make happen. And so I can begin to offer those thoughts to spirit. There is no guilt in love. There is no guilt in spirit. And so we're shifting from a thought system of separation and fear to a thought system of love. And in this thought system of love, it's benevolent. And so if I persist in having thoughts that, sometimes like with this guy, the cigar smoking guy, I was completely irritated with this guy. I mean, if you know me, I'm an ex-smoker. I'm very sensitive to smoke. And I also have a really good schnoz. I mean, I really do. And it's like, I can smell this, from a mile away, I can tell if somebody is smoking or not. And so, and it wafted into my experience, and then I let it disrupt my peace. And the best thought I could think of is, well, this guy has a right to be here. This guy is a beloved child of God. That was the best I could do in that moment in my effort to let it go. And yet, as the story unfolded and I began to surrender my best thinking to a higher thought system, everything began to shift and change. And so there's a level of trust that we have here with the benevolence of the universe giving us our feedback, okay, this thought is not working. And the reason why is because I'm still having to work it. I'm still disturbed, even though I'm thinking this better thought. I'm going to surrender this whole thing. I'm going to surrender my thinking even to a higher source. And so, I'm trying to speak about this one level of consciousness without going up to the next level, which is a little bit challenging. But then the next level is really to give up control, to give up what I think I want, and to begin to allow a higher thought system to descend within my awareness.
Okay.
It's the thought of God. It's the thought of love.
So when you say that you're giving it to spirit, can you just kind of share that process, or
Sure.
how can someone know and begin to understand that procedure or that process if they've never heard this before?
Right. So, I'm trained to do prayer, and you're trained in the holy instant, which to me is very similar. And so what we do is we take a breath and we pause. What is the condition I'm experiencing that I no longer desire? And I can just sit and pause. And I can, to the best of my ability, think of, well, if I'm in fear, I want some derivative of love or peace or joy, and then I connect with spirit. And the way that you and I do it are similar now, but I'm trying to do this for the whole audience, is that we just pause, we turn within, and we connect with source, we connect with God, we connect with Creator, Spirit. And we take a breath and we remember the identity of God, that God is, that this divine intelligence, this infinite source. And then we remember our divine identity as being one with it. And so we're tapping in, if you will, to a higher consciousness that's joined with the heart and mind of God. And so practically, then we when I say offer it, it's, you could say, here's what's going on, and I want something better. I want something deeper. I want to learn love in this situation, correct my perception and my ideas here. And then we can be still and listen.
So it's kind of, just to see if I've got this right, we're just kind of turning away from the outer and turning within.
Right.
And, for me, closing my eyes works, and even using earplugs, when I'm just practicing trying to isolate from the world. But now that I'm turned within, then I'm joined here, or I'm connected with the higher self, the inner self.
And that self guides.
And that's the self that's guiding me.
That's the self that guides. That's the self that is the voice for God. That's the self that we give our full attention and appreciation to. And then we trust that we're given that divine guidance in that moment. Now, sometimes if we don't experience it, we just persist and we trust and allow. But just in doing that, we've created a spaciousness. And whatever it is that was the irritant, we're not focused on anymore. We're shifting our focus and attention.
So we shift from the outer, we turn within, and basically just listen and be quiet and allow ourselves to be informed. Does that make sense?
Yes,
okay.
That does make sense. And also in my particular training is I might go into a spiritual mind treatment, an affirmative prayer that I speak the words that I believe point to my desire and the highest desire. And then I also let that go, you know, I let that go into spirit, this or something better.
All right.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, that's, I think, very helpful.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to have a conversation after this premiere tonight with our inner circle. And it's starting to grow a little bit, but
it is.
There's plenty of room.
It's fun.
There's plenty of room, and the conversations are great. We really kind of get into a variety of different angles into, you know, what's coming forth every week in the inspirational message, and also here as we unpack that a little bit inside the message.
Yeah. And so what I want to say is that if you were to listen to the message and this conversation, what my hope and intention is that I could give enough of this so that wherever we are in our lives, whatever irritants are in your life right now, whatever challenges you might be experiencing, that you can begin to see where you're at and begin to cultivate an awareness and some tools to help you rise. And then I also offered that, you know, we need one another. And so part of what we do on Wednesday night when we come together, and I've been so touched by the individuals who show up and how they share the depth of their experience and their wisdom. You know, it's a collective sharing and that we help one another because, you know, face it, we're probably all going through some stuff right now in our world, and you don't need to be alone. And so we do hope that you join us for the interactive Inner Circle Zoom session. Yeah. And that's right after this will premiere, Wednesdays at 7:30.
Well, I know that we don't often share it here, but I just want to say thank you for your support. You know, we are working. It takes a lot of time and energy to kind of do what we're doing. And you know, sometimes we just kind of get all caught up in it. And I just want to say thank you because I want to be sure that we're recognizing you for supporting us. And if you are curious, if this is a first-time visitor and you want to, you know, participate in that support, we appreciate it. That helps us to, you know, continue our work. You can find a way to do that on our website, truethought.org. And you're going to be having you're going to be doing a message for Christmas this coming Sunday.
Yes.
And did you want to share anything about that? Because some people might be curious about, or is this going to be something different or more traditional, kind of a church conversation, or how do you feel about that? What are we going to be doing?
Thank you.
Kind of put you on the spot.
We will see, because I'm not really, it's still kind of unfolding. And, you know, the way it works for me is I prepare and I have ideas, but until this little camera guy and this producer guy gets going and it's in the can, we'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah. But what I can tell you is that it is going to bring together the message of the season, that you are actually the Christ and that we are the ones that we're waiting for. And so really it's celebrating the birth of the Christ consciousness within each of us, which is so beautiful and is the light that illuminates our way and our pathway in this experience. So it will have something to do with that.
Okay, awesome.
Awesome.
That's what I was looking for.
How did you like us standing?
Yeah.
This was new too.
Yeah, we're talking about maybe
we want to get a little table so I can have my tea and we can have a chat.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
God bless you for another episode of Inside the Message.
Yeah. I'm going to namaste while you do Inside the Message.
Namaste?
Ready?
Right. I don't know what we're doing.
Namaste.
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 God bless you. We love you. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
From the straying of love.